All right. Hello, everyone. Megan Boitano. Welcome to today's RD to RD live show. I am pumped to have Chrissy Carroll joining me today. She is her official title, which is one of my favorite things, is blogger extraordinaire, and along with many others. But we're going to talk today about Pinterest. So if you are blogging, doing anything, creating digital content, one of the ways that you can drive people to your site, to your products, to your services is through Pinterest. And I am going to share total disclosure, I don't do Pinterest well. And Chrissy is an expert. And so asking her to come on the live show and answer my questions and give that benefit to having all of you join in and kind of community question asking of Chrissy. So feel free to, if you've got a burning Pinterest question, we're going to take those throughout the show. So feel free to type them in. If I see it and I know it's something we're going to cover a little bit later in the show, I'm going to go ahead and address that, but we're going to get to all of your questions today. So, Chrissy, thanks for coming on, and we'll kind of kick things off. Tell us a little bit about you, kind of the, short story version of the type of work that you do as a dietitian.
Sure. So, yeah, I run a couple of blogs. The primary one is Snacking and Sneakers, which is food and fitness for active women. And then I have two other sites. One is Build a Wellness blog, which is all about helping other bloggers, and then Dairy Free for Baby, which is dairy-free recipes for moms that are nursing kids that have food intolerances. And I partner on a fourth site called Come Back Mama, which is like a mom blog. And then I do brand consulting. So whether it's doing sponsored content on my own platforms or consulting with brands on nutrition communication messaging and their own social content or helping with their social profiles.
Wow, that's a lot of blogging, a lot of writing. So
yeah, I love blogging though. So
yeah. There was an interesting comment recently on one of the groups that I'm in about how someone was like, "Oh, I can't stand like blogging and writing," and someone else loving to do one-to-one work. And I just love that about our profession, that we can do what we love, and there's so much opportunity to earn an income in a way that really feels good and you enjoy doing. So.
Sure.
Very, very good. So let's dig in a little bit. We've just kind of touched the surface of blogging. So how did blogging become a thing for you? And then particularly Pinterest. So how did you latch on to Pinterest as kind of a strategy, and, give us a little bit more as to why you pursued that. Just talk to us about that angle.
Yeah, so my entrepreneurial journey was kind of like a lot of other people's, where it started doing a million things and not really sure exactly what I wanted to do. So I was doing one-on-one consulting, I was doing corporate wellness, I was doing blogging, just kind of a whole smorgasbord. And over time, I really realized that I liked the corporate wellness side of things. I did that for about 5 years while I was kind of blogging as well. And I just, at some point, things got too busy and I had to narrow down to what I really liked. And I love writing. I love the blogging side of things, particularly kind of the whole passive income side of
flexibility.
Yes. Yeah. So I ended up closing down the corporate wellness company and focusing predominantly on the blog. At that time, it was just the one site. And when I started that blog, so I've been blogging since about 2010. Snacking and Sneakers has been alive since 2014. That's kind of when I rebranded things. And so when I started Snacking and Sneakers, I was only getting, a couple hundred page views a month, like most people get when they start blogging. And then I had a pin that went viral, and all of a sudden I was getting a ton of traffic. And so that really kind of showcased like, wow, Pinterest is something that I need to learn more about and dig into. And so for the last 4 years, I've really been trying to learn all the best practices and kind of expert tips as far as implementing Pinterest strategy.
Got it. Yeah, I think a viral pin definitely would get your attention. Well, when you think about it, you think, how can I replicate that? How can I make that happen again on a consistent, steady basis? So that's what we're going to talk about today. So, let's start out basic. I think it's easy to start talking in the details, and sometimes we get kind of, I don't want to say in the weeds, but we start talking tools, and let's just start at the base level, and then we're going to get more granular as we go throughout the show today. So there's a lot of social media platforms out there, and it can really feel, for me, really time consuming to figure out how to post on all of them. So why, if you're prioritizing, if you're a blogger, why do we want to prioritize Pinterest maybe over another blog? And how does it really work from a business perspective?
Yeah. So I think the thing to keep in mind is there are a ton of social media platforms, and yeah, Pinterest is a social platform to an extent, but it's really more of a search engine. So when we think about Pinterest, 250 million users a month, more than 2 billion searches a month, all right? 2 billion, like that's huge. So those are people, all those 2 billion searches that could be finding your content. And I think what I love about Pinterest is, when we post new content to the blog, with Google, it takes a while to see those SEO results, right? Like you have to wait a couple of months, and you have to build backlinks and all those kinds of things.
You got to make Google happy to get right.
To make Google happy. Pinterest, like there's some technique that goes into it, but you can get traffic pretty much immediately. It's not necessarily a ton of traffic if you're just starting out, but there's always the potential of something going viral, or always the potential of somebody finding your content right away through Pinterest. And so I think that immediate traffic is really a benefit.
So I want to kind of dig into this topic. You said like a search engine, and I hear that often when people talk about YouTube, and they talk about it now with Pinterest, of course. So, Google, you have to rank. So with Pinterest, I hope we'll talk a little bit about, how does it decide if you search for something, and how do you optimize getting found on Pinterest? If it is a search engine, what are those techniques to get your pin seen, I guess?
Yeah, so there's the main way that Pinterest decides, they have what's called a smart feed, and they use a specific algorithm when you search for things. And so there are some factors like your profile, popularity, and other successful pins and things along those lines that factor into how they're going to display pins. So if you search for like chicken wings, you're going to see pretty popular chicken wing posts up top. That's just the way it is, similar to like it would be on Google. But if you have great content that's very visually appealing, and you're keywording it well for some of those long tail keywords, it will be somewhat easy for you to display higher up in the search results, as long as that content is good. Like, are people clicking through and they're seeing what they want to see, and they're staying on that page for a while without clicking back? Kind of some of the similar things that we see within Google ranking factors. But it doesn't take as long, in my opinion, for those things to happen within Pinterest. The other thing to keep in mind is that there's two different search functions. So there's search functions for keywords, if I type in chicken wings, and then there's search for hashtags. So if I type in hashtag chicken wings, it's chronological. It's not based on any kind of smart algorithm. So I think one of the things that's underutilized is hashtags, and that's because originally Pinterest said, no, don't use hashtags, we don't use those, and then like a year ago they changed their mind. But if people are searching for hashtags, then it's chronological. So you want to make sure that you're pinning a lot of content with those hashtags, so your stuff is coming up in that.
Got it. So you mentioned just keywords. So we had a really great show a month ago or so with Laura Clevenger, and we talked about keywords. So when you're doing Pinterest, are those similar, those short keywords, and then you mentioned the longer tail keywords, would those be the same ones that you're using to please Google that you would use to please Pinterest or be found on Pinterest? Same thing?
Yeah, for the most part, they're going to be fairly similar. I can show you. Let me flip on screen share.
Let's have a screen share time.
Yes. All right. So let me flip over here. You guys can all see this? Yeah?
Yes, I'm gonna.
Okay, cool. So if I'm in Pinterest right now, and I wanted to search for, let's say I'm doing like a smoothie bowl. If I search for smoothie bowl, these first things here that populate automatically in the dropdown, those are going to be the most popular search terms within Pinterest. If I click enter on it, it's going to populate up here as well. And so you can see these are things that you may want to add in, because smoothie bowl is going to be pretty hard to rank for. Like, these are probably pretty popular pins up here. But maybe a strawberry smoothie bowl or a breakfast smoothie bowl. And you can kind of keep going over here to see other ideas as well. How to make a smoothie bowl, keto smoothie bowl. So those are, when I'm crafting a pin, I'm going to take whatever I have come up with as far as a Google keyword, and I'm going to type it into here and maybe get a couple of other ideas. And I'm going to flip out a screen share now so I can keep talking.
Okay.
Let's see. How do I get...
There's like a stop sharing button, but.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Thank you.
Of course.
So I am going to go into Pinterest and I'm going to look for those keywords as far as crafting my pin description. And then when I'm making my pin description, I'm going to make sure to weave in at least a couple keywords. So that's the other thing is you don't want to just be like, okay, here's a do-it-yourself smoothie bowl. But here's a do-it-yourself smoothie bowl. This delicious strawberry smoothie bowl is a great healthy breakfast recipe. So you're getting a couple of different keywords in there, and that'll help you rank for some different search terms.
So let's kind of go over, I think, the anatomy of a pin, because you've talked about your description and then we have kind of our image. Can you give a little bit more detail about those two elements kind of before we start talking about kind of the blog, that image and how you get pinned?
Yeah. So as far as the pin, I think definitely vertical pins are still what's being recommended. Pinterest has said square is okay. I don't think that they do as well. So I still recommend the vertical pin images. So either like 600 by 900 or 735 by 1102. Canva has the preset setting in there that you can use. So those nice vertical pin images, you want them to be good quality. And I always recommend a text overlay on it because if you think of how most of us use Pinterest, like either on desktop or on mobile, we're kind of just scrolling through, we search something, and when something catches our eye, that's when we stop and we maybe read the description or we click over.
Right.
So you want it to be eye-catching and you want people to know what it's about right away. So if it's a recipe that like you can't easily identify exactly what it is, or it has a certain, maybe it's like a dairy-free recipe, but unless I write dairy-free, nobody's going to know that, without clicking through. So those text overlays I think are really important for helping people to identify it. Go ahead.
No, and I just, for everyone who is joining us, I did put a poll out on the Facebook about whether or not you include a Pinterest-friendly graphic with your blog posts currently. So we'll see how that one plays out.
Yes. And if you're not, start doing it.
Yes, if you're not, start doing it. And that's that vertical friendly. So you gave some specific examples. I'm kind of all about the ROI. So let's talk a little bit about maybe when you first started using Pinterest. Okay, you had this viral pin and then you're like, I'm really going to try to dig into this. What's realistic if I'm really not super established blogger, that I'm looking to drive some traffic from Pinterest? What's good? What should you expect starting out? And where would you like to build to? Is that kind of a reasonable question?
I don't think that there's like a hard and fast rule for it, because I think it's going to depend on what type of content you're doing, how many people are looking for it, like your particular niche. But I think that you can expect some traffic relatively recent or relatively quickly. So to give you an example, like when I started Build a Wellness blog, like within a couple of months, I was up to, 1,000 to 2,000 page views a month, and almost all of those are from Pinterest.
So how do you know they're from Pinterest? I use Google Analytics and it tells you like platforms. Is that where you go in to find that out? Okay.
Yeah. So you would go into Google Analytics and you would look at like the acquisition tab, and then you would see where it's coming from. And you can get really granular there as far as like which specific pins are driving traffic and all that. But yeah, so that would be one example. Another example, like back when I started Snacking and Sneakers, I mentioned I was only getting a couple hundred page views a month. And when that pin went viral, within a couple of months, I was actually getting like between 5,000 and 10,000 page views a month, specifically mostly due to that viral pin, which is a blessing and a curse, because if you only have really one piece of content driving traffic, it's not ideal. But it just goes to show you that, you can really get some pretty instantaneous results, within a few months time frame.
Right, which is very different than I think Google SEO work, which I think kind of work in tandem. You don't want to ignore SEO for Google. So, okay, let's we'll go back to my question list because I tend to get off track. But assuming someone's really brand new, just getting started, maybe they've been blogging, okay, but they're going to go back and they want to maybe update some of their old blog posts with better Pinterest graphics. What are the first 2 or 3 things they should do that are going to get them the most return on their effort? Because we don't have a lot of time.
Yeah. So number 1 is creating those vertical images with the text overlay. Number 2 is crafting a good keyword description. And that's probably the biggest mistake I see people make, is just not even bothering with a description, and it's either pulling the alt text or it's pulling the title, and that's you're not going to get as big of a bang for your buck. So
do you use a similar one like you might use for your meta, like your little description for Yoast and your blog?
Yeah, I think the meta description tends to be a little character limited, right? I think it's so many characters. Pinterest, you can go longer. So I generally do 2 to 3 conversational kind of sentences that weave in some keywords, and then
back to that smoothie bowl example. I think for me, I'm always like to talk really specific. So let's say you have a recipe for a smoothie bowl, and you've gone in and you did a search in Pinterest like you showed us, and you saw strawberry, maybe you saw keto or something, and your strawberry and keto don't go together, but maybe let's just stick with strawberry bowl, smoothie bowl. That's just terrible. I'm sorry. But you decide you're going to craft your Pinterest description, and you say a couple of conversational sentences because you want it to not turn people off, right? You don't want to just be jammed with keywords. Kind of walk us through how you're going to craft this smoothie bowl description.
So again, I would try to pick, a couple keywords to put in there. So strawberry smoothie bowl is going to be one. I might choose like a broad keyword like healthy breakfast recipe as another. And then maybe that smoothie bowl is also dairy free. Like dairy free smoothie is a third.
Got it.
If I kind of keep in mind those 3 keywords, it might just look something like, oh my gosh, are you looking for an amazing healthy breakfast recipe? This strawberry smoothie bowl is so delicious. And guess what? It's a dairy-free smoothie for those of you with food allergies. Something along those lines. It's kind of hard when I'm going off the cuff.
Yes. But go check out Chrissy's pin description, and you'll get a lot of really great ideas. So I want to make sure we answer some questions as we have coming in here. So Amanda, answering your question, an example of a Pinterest-friendly graphic in a blog post, please. And does Pinterest drive blog post reading more than blog drives Pinterest viewing? Or is it equal?
So Pinterest is definitely going to drive traffic to the blog. People are most likely not going from your blog to Pinterest, unless the exception would be if you use that for maybe clients as resources. So like some people will create, certain boards for clients and make them secret boards, or have certain boards that are relevant to clients. But I would say definitely like Pinterest driving traffic to the blog.
So kind of to walk through these steps. So I wrote a blog post, I made a pretty image, I put it in my post, right? Then in order for people to find it on Pinterest, I need to pin it to my Pinterest business account, and then other people will repin that, and when they search for it, it can be found. Even if you have a Pinterest-friendly graphic on your blog post, it's not going to be found in Pinterest unless you go pin it there, right?
Okay. Exactly. Okay. Yeah. So let me, I'll screen share again so I can show an example of what this would look like. So let me just kind of walk through, I'll go to a post here and I can show you how to go. There we go.
So you use WordPress.
I do. I use WordPress. So this is a post I did recently. It's like homemade macadamia nut butter.
I looked at that one. It looked delicious. P.S.
It is really good. Like almost too good because you can just keep eating it by the spoonful. So this featured image here, this is generally, I put my Pinterest friendly image here. Not everybody likes it being the first image. Some people do like a horizontal image for the featured image. It's really personal preference, but for this site, I do it here. And I'll zoom in on this in a second, but this would be the pin graphic here. And then what I'm going to do when I'm uploading this to the blog is I'm going to add my Pinterest description. So here's a good example. If you're looking for a good macadamia nut recipe, look no further. This homemade macadamia nut butter is delicious. I know most of us veer towards macadamia nut cookies, but it's always fun to step outside the box, blah, blah, blah. And then a couple hashtags at the end.
So why do you put the text there?
Yeah. So I use Tasty Pins on this site, which is it's a paid plugin. It just makes it really easy to enter the Pinterest description here. Okay. Alt text you want to reserve for Google. It's meant for visually impaired readers as well as helping Google identify what the photo's about. So in this case, homemade macadamia nut butter. I actually should have probably done a better alt text there, like on a spoon dripping into a thing. But generally you want to keep the Pinterest text and the alt text separate. That wasn't the case a couple of years ago, but now that's best practice. If you don't have the tasty pins, you can do it manually. The problem is if you use your featured image, I don't know of a way to do it manually, but you could always put an image in a post. So like right now, if I'm in the back end here, let's say that this image here.
You're on the text tab. That's very brave. I'm always on the visual tab.
If this was the image that I was going to use, I already have it set up here. This is what, I use Tasty Pins for, but you can type this in manually. So you would go, the image code would look like this part before that was in there. And then you would just type in data pin description equals, and then put your pin description in quotes. And that would go in there. And so if you don't want to use a paid plugin, that's the way that you would do it manually.
So I'm a little confused. So when I go to, so if I put my pen on Pinterest through like my social media scheduler, that little description doesn't actually live with the blog post. You want to do it on the actual post itself.
It depends on the scheduler you're using. So, and it depends, like if you're using a social sharing plugin within WordPress, that's a little bit different. If you're just using a scheduler, like something like CoSchedule, that's not going to live on the blog post itself. So best practice.
How would you know what's happening? Like where would you could go to your Pinterest?
Go into your text editor and see if it's here.
Okay.
Yeah. So this would be you generally want all your vertical images to have this data pin description. So if somebody's on your blog and they want to pin it themselves, this is what's going to populate in that description.
Okay, and we'll put a link to the plugin, the paid plugin that you use, but just to kind of recap for everyone, because you're using that plugin, when you added your media and you put that text we were just looking at, it created that data pin equals next to that image for you. Yes.
Yep, it adds this Pinterest text box here, which most people won't see on WordPress if they're not using that plugin. So it just adds that.
Okay, got it. That was really helpful. I know it was a little technical for everyone. I know we have another question here, so I'm getting to your question. So much good stuff here.
Yeah, let me just show you kind of the rest of the workflow. That way it might help to go over that. So here's the post now, right? So I've got my pin image here, this vertical image, homemade macadamia nut butter.
Text overlay right there, right?
Text overlay right there. And when I click to save that on Pinterest, it's going to populate the description that we put in. So this is that Pinterest text description right here.
And that's what's searchable when people are searching to get found, which is important if you want traffic.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So, and again, that's the mistake most people make, is not completing this or just having it be the name of the recipe. And really you can capitalize on more keywords by crafting a good description here. So you've got your vertical image, you've got your description, and then you're just going to pin that to the most relevant board first. So like, I don't have a nut recipe board on here, but something like, snacks and desserts. I've already done this, so I'm not going to go ahead and do it again right now, but I would save it to there. And then from there, I would go back and every day pin that pin to the next few relevant boards. So for me, I generally have about 10 to 20 per pin that are relevant. I use Tailwind to schedule, but you can do it manually too.
So tell me why you go back and pin it multiple times.
Yeah. Pinterest you want to ideally have new content constantly flowing in there. So every time I pin something, it's looked at as new content. And it just helps your content potentially be seen more. Especially if you think about that hashtag feed, the chronological feed. If you're pinning something every day and somebody's searching for that hashtag, odds are pretty high they're going to find it over like a 20-day time frame if you're pinning it every day for 20 days.
Got it. Okay, that makes a little bit more sense there. Okay, so going back to Stephanie's question here, can you go back and edit descriptions after you've already published a pin? Based on this video, I'd like to go back and ensure I included the keywords in the description. So if you're going back to go, oh yeah, I forgot to do that.
Yeah. So can. You can edit them on your, with a caveat, you can edit them in your Pinterest profile, right? But it doesn't change anybody that's already repinned. And it's not seen as new content by Pinterest when you edit. So what I would recommend doing instead is doing a new pin. Like if you have a good vertical image that you used prior, do that same vertical image and then craft your new description and save that new, rather than going back and just editing the old stuff.
Got it. So don't go back and edit your old pins, create a new one.
I just don't think it's going to give you the biggest bang for your buck.
Okay. And then you want to make sure you have that pin description in your blog post too.
Exactly.
Because that way when people happen to find you from the web, not from Pinterest, it'll carry over.
Exactly.
And if somebody pins it to their board and it has that description, does that help you get found? Like if something's getting repinned?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And the more people that pin your content, the more Pinterest prioritizes you in search feeds. So.
Okay. Got it. Wow. Whew. This is very helpful. I'm kind of starting to see how things kind of fit together. Like it's that blogging flow, right? So I feel like every time the more you get into this blogging, it's like, okay, that's one more box to put on my list of things I need to do. But, I was just looking, of course, I was sneaking a peek while you were on that macadamia nut recipe that you had 228, I don't know if those are repins or pins or whatever that means, but that was a big number to me. So there's definitely that value where something like Instagram, I feel like getting clicks is like, getting your content seen can be so hard.
Yeah. Instagram's not great for traffic. That's why I love Pinterest so much, because it is. It's great.
Yeah. And we're gonna, where did we go here? I lost a comment. Oh, Corin Cantor said the majority of the traffic to my website has been Pinterest for a while. Bloggers are, here she says, some bloggers are starting to shy away from Pinterest because of ongoing problems with their pins getting stolen. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think it's just the nature of the game. I think, if your pins are getting stolen, you can report them. I've had a few. I don't worry too much about it unless I see a huge drop off from a particular pin. So if you're getting, a couple hundred page views every day from a certain pin and all of a sudden it goes down to none, or like 10, odds are somebody stole that pin and now they're getting the traffic. So
how do you steal? They'd probably beyond the scope of this, but perhaps Google Pinterest stealing or pin stealing.
It's essentially just them stealing the image and then they direct it to their website instead. But it's pretty easy to report it within Pinterest.
And they'll take it down.
Give them a strike. I don't know if it really does anything to give them a strike, but I think it's just kind of one of those things. I mean, with whatever in blogging, people are going to scrape your content, they're going to steal your images. I don't worry about it a ton.
Ugh, okay. You can't, there's just bad people in this world. Okay, so we have lots of questions. I want to first, though, we've kind of been teasing around this question, and we're going to get back to the questions, people. Let's kind of walk through the blog process, like kind of start to finish, talk us through where Pinterest kind of comes up for you, and how do you kind of approach when you're going to write a blog post, and now you've created it, kind of just walk us through, one, you're an awesome blogger, and two, that Pinterest part.
Yeah. So, I think from the blog standpoint, I always start with keyword research from the beginning. So at least now I do when I'm working smart instead of like 3 years ago. So I do keyword research similar to probably what, came up in Laura's thing. I use a little bit of a different tool. It's called Key Search, but that's how I decide what to write about. So I always work kind of backwards like that. Once I have the keyword, then I'll start crafting the post or developing the recipe. I always make sure when I'm taking pictures, let's say it's a recipe post, that I am taking a lot of vertical images. So I have those Pinterest friendly ones, and you start to get used to it too. Like if I'm that macadamia nut recipe, like you can see there's like a lot of white space at the top for me to leave, or at the bottom to leave a text overlay, either one. But I try to make sure that when I'm taking images, I do that so that I leave some space, on either side. So that's kind of like the start piece of it. When I write the blog post itself, I always make sure that while I'm writing the post, I also try to write the social shares and the pin descriptions. It's kind of easy to batch the work. So like when you're in that writing mode, you get the writing part of it done. Okay. When you say you write the social shares, meaning write your little blurb that you're going to use when you share it on your various platforms? Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. I try to do everything, all the writing part at once. Okay. So once the writing part's done, then I draft the post and I'll put the pin-friendly image in there. For some posts, I have multiple pin images. It depends on how long the post is and what it's about. So if I have multiples, most of the time I include them. Sometimes I will hide an image, and that's, again, that plugin. You can do it through that, or you can manually code it. And then once the images are in there, add the description, publish the post, pin the post, schedule out the social shares to every relevant board. 1 day, I use a 1 day interval. People use
So this is where Tailwind comes in, right? Yeah. So kind of talking about the tools that you use. So I know there was a question about Tailwind. So let's just talk about what that is and why it's valuable.
Yeah, so Tailwind's a scheduling tool for Pinterest. I just want to put up front, you don't need any tool. Like, I have a brand that I'm consulting with right now, and we do everything manually. So it's completely up to you. I will say Tailwind makes my life so much easier because it's just so much more simple to like get everything batched at once. I generally schedule all of my old content out a month at a time. So I go in at the beginning of the month and I schedule about 30 pieces of content for that month.
And when you're saying schedule, this is what we were talking about earlier, where you want to repin, put it on your boards over and over again. Is that what you mean by scheduling content?
Yeah, so let me show you. I'll jump over here.
I feel like I should know this, but I don't, so.
No, it's fine. So let's do, all right. So since I have Tailwind, there's like a browser extension for Tailwind. That's why this schedule button is coming up here. So if I click schedule, this is going to bring up my Tailwind for me. And what I can do here is I can pick all of the relevant group boards and personal boards that I have to schedule to. So what I do is I just kind of go down the list here and pick all of the ones that I would want to schedule this post to. So generally it ends up being about, 10 to 20 boards, depending on what the content is. So let's pretend I've got all my boards listed here. I've gone through the whole list. And then what I would do is I would click this use interval button, and I'm gonna set an interval for 1 day here. And once I set that, then I just hit schedule now, and it's scheduled out for that entire time frame.
And so when you're using Tailwind to pin content, are you pinning just your own content, or are you also pinning other people's content, which I've heard is important for Pinterest?
You want to use it, whether you're scheduling or whether you're manually pinning, you want to use a blend of both yours and others' content. I tend to veer a little bit more towards a heavier proportion of your own. That's kind of controversial, but I think that it gives you the best bang for your buck as far as traffic. So I generally recommend about 50 to 80% of your own content and 20 to 50% of other people's content. You don't have to get like super into the numbers. Just make sure you're pinning a mixture of stuff. So with Tailwind, again, I'll schedule out all my own content. I like to add things to Tailwind tribes. So tribes are basically a way of like sharing your content to other people in a group on Tailwind. Most of them have rules like, for everyone you share, you have to hit somebody else's content. So in that case, I'm going to go into my tribes and I'm going to schedule out some of their content. And then other things I come across on Pinterest, or if I decide to do a share thread on Facebook, I would, pin other people's content in there. So yeah, a mixture of both.
So I can definitely see, as someone who's trying to grow a blog, that there's a lot of value kind of in Pinterest. And I think that balance of, what platform you have, Instagram or otherwise. How much time, though? I'm just curious, like ballpark, you have Tailwind and you're pretty savvy at doing this. If you're a new blogger who's kind of, or you're going to get Pinterest, you're like, I'm going to do this. How much time, if you want to do it at least well and really start to see some results, should you think about allocating to, this process?
It's going to be a bigger time commitment at the beginning, right? Because you're going to be creating all those images if you need to create them and crafting all your descriptions. So I think, up front, if you can set aside 5 or 10 hours a week to get that work done, then it really just becomes like a plug and play kind of thing. So I have a giant spreadsheet of all my content for, 300 blog posts. And then it's as easy as, okay, I'm going to schedule out these 30 at the beginning of the month. And then I'm pretty much done for the month. So
doing it in a batch. I was pleased 100% of people polled said they do have vertical Pinterest friendly graphics. So I think some of these people have more skills than they maybe thought they did. So kudos to people listening in. Okay, so here we go. From another really good question. I think those of us who aren't rock star photo, food, recipe people. Most of my blog posts are not recipe driven and I may use stock images. Can you create a pin using a stock image? Is there any reason that you can't? Check the license terms, of course. Most of them you can put on social, you just can't resell them or put it up for sale sometimes.
Yeah, I think stock images are fine. I think, given the caveats that you mentioned, Megan, as far as making sure that you're able to use them depending on the license. And I'll use Canva's dollar images or Deposit Photos dollar images. But you would do the same thing. So you would take the stock image, you would add the text overlay. I think when it comes to content-based posts, that text overlay, as far as how you're encouraging people to click, gets more important, because with a recipe, you can be looking for a recipe for a smoothie bowl and you see something pretty and you're like, okay, cool, I want to make that. With content-based things, if I come across a pin that's just like, why vitamin D is good, like, that's not really encouraging me. But if I come across something that's like, this will happen if you don't take vitamin D. So
is Pinterest still good for people who don't do a lot of recipe posts? So, I feel like people are on Pinterest a lot to find recipes or food versus kind of people are going on Google maybe to find what are the best, most profitable digital products to sell. Are they really going to look on Pinterest for that, or looking at what content, like, should I be more focused? Is Pinterest a good fit for me?
I mean, I think Pinterest does, obviously recipes do really well, do-it-yourself does really well. I think health and fitness content still does amazing on Pinterest. My most popular pins are not recipes. Same with Google. They're not recipes, they're fitness content. They're running and triathlon content.
Do you do a lot of infographics too, which I know can be helpful on Pinterest?
They can. I would say that I think the time that gets put into an infographic, if you're putting all that information, they get repinned a lot. They don't get as much traffic though. So I personally don't bother with them, but you can try them out. I think blogging stuff does really well on Pinterest if you do any of that kind of content. But yeah, for sure. I mean, people are going to go to Google for like a lot of factual based things.
Okay.
People tend to go to Pinterest for more like aspirational stuff. So like, I want to make money at home, or, is there a training plan? I mean, they go to Google for both, but I think Pinterest tends to be a little bit more aspirational than Google.
Good. Okay. So I did have one other question, my own. We're getting back to this. We're starting to run short on time, but, I keep getting a little notice here. If I'm getting glitchy, my internet connection is strange. There's some work going on across the street because they always do that on my live show days. And anyway, they're digging. Hopefully they're not digging the internet line up. So whatever. I know it's on that side of the street, so I'm worried. But rich pins and recipe posts. So there's some, like, when a rich pin from going to not use very technical terms, but when you're in Pinterest and you search for a recipe, you can actually see the ingredients, pretty much see the whole thing almost in Pinterest, where you don't have to go back to your website to necessarily see what's in the post. Or is that good? Is that bad? What do you recommend?
Yeah, so there's kind of a divide here, and I'm going to go on the side of rich pins, and I'll tell you why. So Pinterest wants people to use rich pins. They press, for people to use rich pins. And when you use rich pins, you have a greater reach. That's pretty much established. When you use rich pins, when you turn off rich pins, you generally do get a higher click-through rate for your pins. The downside to that is it's a less qualified click-through. So if I don't know what the ingredients are and I click through and I think, I don't have that, I'm going to click back right away. Whereas which
isn't good for SEO either. Google will be happy.
Exactly. So even though you're going to get less potential clicks, I think the traffic is better when you have rich pins. But I mean, honestly, it's one of those things that, like, if you want to test it, turn off rich pins for a couple of months. You can't test it for like a week. You need a couple of months time frame to decide if it's worth it or not. I also think it depends on what kinds of recipes you do. So if you're focused on, like, I do only 3 ingredient recipes, then yeah, maybe turning off rich pins is probably best for you, because if all you have are 3 ingredients, it's going to be pretty easy to figure out how to make it without the instructions.
Right. But for example, I just posted like a pumpkin chocolate chip recipe that has buttermilk in it. Like someone may not have that, and I might really annoy them that they would go to my thing like, oh, I don't have that, and click back, because it's not something everybody has in their
Exactly. Yeah. So the rich pins is going to display the ingredients. Again, lower potential click-throughs, but more qualified click-throughs.
Got it. Okay, that's really valuable. All right, so we have about 5 minutes left, so last call for all you guys jumping in questions if some have popped up. And I asked whether or not people use Canva, and people was like 2/3 use Canva and another third uses a different tool. So we don't have 100% Canva users out there. So we want to get
all ones too. It doesn't matter.
So I think we kind of covered some of the mistakes that people make. I want to get into tools and resources, make sure that you get a chance to tell us what your favorite, whether it's a certain, blogger. I know like Melissa Griffin, like she's got a lot of good Pinterest stuff, your own websites, where people can go. They're like, okay, I want to do this. Where are the tools? Maybe not necessarily buying Tailwind, but like more information.
Yeah. So I think one that's underutilized is Pinterest's own blog. They put a ton of info out there about trends, about new things that they're using for businesses, about promoted pins, a lot of the things that I think are underutilized. So I would say Pinterest's own blog, definitely other online entrepreneurs. So like Melissa Griffin and Kate All from Simple Pin Media. She's fabulous. Her website and her Facebook group and her podcast, tons of information there. The Facebook group is Simple Pin Media, Simple Pin. I'll get it up in the comments, but she has a Facebook group. Her website's Simple Pin Media. I'm blanking on the name of the group right now, but that would be another great resource as well. Any kind of podcasts about, online entrepreneurship, generally they're going to have some episodes on Pinterest, like Food Blogger Pro has had a couple of Pinterest episodes.
Those are good ones.
I definitely would recommend like more recent info, because even from, I have a course on Pinterest, and even from when I started that, there's a couple updates that I need to go in and make. It's nothing too big, but things change a lot month to month with Pinterest. So trying to just stay up to date, I think, on the most recent info is helpful.
Yeah. So tell us about your course, what's in it, and kind of what it kind of go from this to like, how does it help people?
Yeah, so it's called Pin Smart, and it's focused on, dietitian, fitness, other wellness entrepreneurs. So the content's pretty relevant to all niches. And it's essentially 7 modules. It starts with the basics. So how do I optimize my profile? How do I optimize my boards? Those kinds of things. And then it moves into some of the strategy type stuff. So how many pins a day should I be pinning? And, what else, like what are some kind of underutilized strategies that might help me? And then I get into some of the more intermediate things, like how to assess your analytics and how to do promoted pins. So if you want to put some money behind a pin, how you would go about setting up a traffic campaign within Pinterest.
Got it. There's a lot of good stuff in there. It's like a whole new world of learning. So I'm going to check the questions really here, make sure I went through all of them, which it looks like you did. Okay. So how can people connect with you if they want to follow you, check out your websites, give us a rundown of where people can find you?
Sure. So on most social platforms like Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, I'm Chrissy the RD. And then my email is chrissy@snackingandsneakers.com. If you're interested in more of like the entrepreneurship tips and blogging tips, Pinterest tips, buildawellnessblog.com would be the place to get that information.
Yes, Build a Wellness Blog has some awesome posts on there. So just go ahead and bookmark that, or sign up for the RSS feed or whatever, because you want all those new posts when they come out. I'm like, when are we getting a new amazing post from Chrissy?
I know, I'm behind right now.
Like, come on. No, I'm kidding. So this was awesome. So thank you so much for coming on. And if there's any questions, as a lot of people catch the replay too, but we'll tag you. We'll try to address those. So awesome. We are back in 2 weeks. I will have Lisa Klitsch on. We're actually going to do another blogging type focused RD to RD live show. We're going to talk really about content strategy and promotion. So really not just like I wrote an article, okay, it's done. Really looking at how do you get strategic about not recreating the wheel. And I'm really excited about the idea of kind of creating a web of content, a lot of posts around a certain topic, and how you can kind of take one post and really use it in many different ways, whether that's on social or otherwise. So I think it'll really be a nice segue from kind of what you've been talking about to kind of thinking, oh, this is one more thing, when it's really kind of part of that web you do as a blogger. So that'll be a lot of fun. That's on the 12th of December. So Chrissy, thank you so much for coming on the live show. To all of you, thank you for tuning in. This is by far one of the most favorite things I do as an entrepreneur, and I just love it. So thank you.